Have you ever liked someone so much that you ended up teasing them and pretending to hate them? I used to be like that. And honestly, my whole childhood was full of those silly moments. I remember one time during recess, Emily carefully folded a paper crane and handed it to me. I did not even say thank you. I just blurted out, "Looks ugly. Throw it away." But that night I hid it under my pillow and kept staring at it, smiling to myself like an idiot. Another day while we were playing with a plastic ball, I deliberately kicked it hard so it would fly past Emily. Our friends shouted, "Hey Jack, watch it." I defended myself, saying she was standing in the wrong spot. But truth is, my heart dropped. I was just afraid she might cry. And then there was this one afternoon when Emily was sitting in the library, head down, writing something in her notebook. I walked past, snuck a glance, and teased her, saying, "Bet, it's just a bunch of silly stuff." But that whole evening guilt ate away at me. I just wished I could go back and see what she was really writing. That was me, always coming up with some ridiculous way to act like I hated her. On the outside, I acted cold and annoyed, but deep down, I missed her like crazy. And that silly little childhood left me with a memory that has never faded. I liked someone so much that all I could do was pretend to hate them. If you have ever had your own Emily, feel free to share in the comments. I believe that deep in everyone's memory there is at least one time we liked someone so much we just could not say it out loud. And if you want to look back at more of these goofy memories with me, do not forget to hit follow so we can keep reliving them together in the next episodes. All those little acts of pretending to hate actually began on a very special morning. The day Emily walked into our classroom, carrying a shy smile and a whole new season of memories. That morning, the bell rang urgently, echoing down the long hallway, along with the sound of running shoes and locker doors clinking shut. I was fumbling with a pencil that had lost its point when the classroom door swung open. Mr. Richard Coleman stood next to a girl I'd never seen before, clutching a stack of books tightly to her chest. He said simply, "Everyone, this is Emily. She just transferred here from Pennsylvania. Say hello." The room buzzed instantly like a breeze had swept through. Emily gave a little nod, her smile just bright enough to light up the space around her. She wore a neat red and green plaid dress, her hair tied in 2 braids with faded ribbons, her eyes bright but slightly nervous. I quickly looked down at my notebook, pretending to scribble something to look busy. My heart was pounding and my hand shook so much I wrote off the edge of the page. Mike, sitting behind me, nudged my back. "Hey Jack, your face is red," I snapped. "Quit talking nonsense." Everyone giggled like they had just caught me in some big secret. Mr. Coleman pointed to the row of desks near the window. "Emily, you can sit over there next to Jack." The chair creaked. I stole a quick glance, then turned away like there was nothing worth seeing. Morning sunlight poured in, casting tiny chalk dust specks floating in the air. Emily opened her notebook, carefully placed a small eraser on the corner of the desk, her every move slow and deliberate. I could hear my heart beat clearly, like the ticking of the clock on the wall. History class began. Mr. Coleman drew a long line in chalk across the map pinned to the wall, talking about the railroads connecting the East Coast to the Midwest. He had this habit of weaving Civil War stories into his lectures, telling them with such passion, like he was watching the armies march down those same tracks. I stared at the white chalk dust on his fingers, at the dirty eraser cloth. But eventually my eyes wandered over to the little shadow Emily cast on her desk. She tilted her head as she took notes, and a small strand of hair slipped down across her cheek. I wanted to reach out and tell her, but instead, I tapped my pen on the desk impatiently. Emily looked up and caught my gaze. I immediately turned away and asked Mike, "Do you have a spare pen?" Mike smirked. "Pen, yes. Courage, probably not." During recess, everyone shuffled out to the yard. The early autumn breeze rushed past the maple trees near the entrance. Emily paused in front of the announcement board, seemingly reading the club list. I walked past and muttered, "Don't block the way." My voice sounded so gruff, even I hated it. Emily stepped aside slightly and gently replied, "Sorry." Then she looked at me, her eyes glistening. "You are Jack, right?" I nodded, trying to keep a straight face. "I am Emily," she added, then hesitated. "At my old school, I was really bad at history, too." I blurted, "Do not expect me to tutor you?" Then I turned and walked off. After a few steps, I glanced back. Emily was looking down at her shoes, fiddling with the strap on her bag. Something in my chest tightened. Back in class, Mr. Coleman rearranged the seating for group discussions. I clearly heard my name paired with Emily and Mike. "Sir, can I switch seats?" I asked. "Can I sit with Pete instead?" The class burst into laughter. Mr. Coleman gave me a knowing but calm look and kept the list as it was. I reluctantly pulled out my chair. Emily placed her notebook in the middle. "Let's share," she offered. I snapped quietly. "Do not crowd, I will do it." She blinked once, then pulled her hand back. A few seconds later, she gently slid a green paperclip toward me. "This is for you, so your pages do not fly away." I grumbled, "I do not need it." But my hand still took it and placed it beside the notebook, strangely neat. Sometimes a simple nod instead of pushing someone away could write an entirely different story. Lunchtime in the cafeteria smelled like square pizza and cardboard milk cartons. Mike stood in line with me, sneaking glances at the new table where Emily sat, struggling to open her milk box. "Go say hi, Mike," nudged. "Are you crazy?" I shook my head. Emily looked up and caught us. She raised her hand in a gentle wave, the kind of smile that would get any normal person to walk over and start a conversation. I replied with a curt nod, then turned to Mike and started asking about random things: the football team, the music on the radio last night. Mike chuckled. "You are trying so hard to act normal that it is weird, Jack." That afternoon we had a reading exercise. When it was Emily's turn, she stood up and read clearly with soft but steady rhythm, emphasizing all the right parts like she'd practiced. "Good," the teacher nodded. Then he looked at me. "Jack, your turn." I stood up, throat dry. The words on the page blurred like they knew I was about to mess up. Emily tilted her book and nudged it toward me so I could see more clearly. I glared, "I can do it myself." But then I noticed faint blue ink marks on the edge of the page. Emily had underlined the tricky words. I read much smoother, then sat down pretending like no one had helped me. At the end of class, the teacher assigned homework: map out the railroad routes on a blank map. "Work in your groups," he said. Emily turned to me. "You could stop by the library before heading home." "Do you want to know?" I cut her off and instantly regretted it when I saw her expression falter. She pressed her lips together, nodded, and slowly packed up her things. Mike looked at me. "How long do you plan on hating the whole world?" I snapped. "No one asked for your opinion." But my mind was stuck on that single no. I had just said like a stone dropped in water, sending ripples far beyond. On the way out of school, the sky had turned golden. Emily was a few steps ahead, her bag slipping off one shoulder. I wanted to shout, "Watch out, it is falling." But instead I shoved my hands into my pockets and kicked a pebble along the curb. By the school sign, the wind loosened a braid and a strand of hair fell across her forehead. I turned my head the other way. A crossing guard was whistling along with an old song playing from a radio by her feet. All those ordinary things suddenly became unforgettable just because one new person had entered my life. That evening at home, I opened my backpack and took out my notebook. The green paperclip Emily gave me was clipped neatly to a page. I pinched it, tested tension, unfastened. I placed it on my desk, then clipped it somewhere else again. I tried drawing the railroad route, erasing and redrawing until the page was wrinkled with white streaks. My younger brother Billy peeked in. "Why so serious?" he asked. "Homework," I mumbled. "Who gave you that green clip?" "Found it." Billy raised an eyebrow, always able to tell when I lied. He laughed. "Sure you did." Later I found a slip of paper tucked in my history book. Written neatly, I underlined some tricky words today. "If you like tomorrow, I'll show you more. Emily." I jolted upright, heart racing in the empty room. I hid the note in my drawer, then retrieved it, reread it as though the words would disappear if I blinked. The next morning I arrived early. The blackboard still bore damp wipes and chalk dust lingered in the air. Emily came in, set down her bag, and looked at me hesitantly. "About yesterday's page." Thanks," I said, trying to act casual. She smiled, "No problem." Then she handed me a blank map, marked lightly with pencil lines. I sketched the main routes. "Do they look okay?" I replied. "I'll do it myself." Her smile dimmed a little, then softened. "Okay. If you need anything, just tell me." I nodded, short and awkward as ever. Sometimes liking someone isn't holding their hand. It's hiding their note in your drawer and pretending you never got it. At recess, Mike pulled me aside. "Hey, you could at least be nicer." I frowned. "I am nice." Mike laughed. "If nice means speaking in one-syllable sentences, then you're doing great." I tried to deflect, "Better than you talking nonstop." Mike shook his head, unusually serious. "I'm not kidding. New kids always feel out of place. If you can't get close, at least don't push her further away." In the next class, we were up to present the railroad map. Mike, Emily, and I stood before the board. I held the chalk and drew the main routes, using my other hand to hold the map flat. Emily whispered, "This one curves down here." She was right, but I said, "I know." Mike shook his head, then explained, "Emily means it crosses the river there." I hesitated, then added it. Mr. Coleman nodded. "Good." The class clapped. I set down the chalk, wiped my hands, and looked out the window to avoid Emily. But by chance I caught her smile, soft, not proud, like finding the missing piece of a puzzle. After class, Mr. Coleman asked me to stay. "Jack," he said in his calm tone, "group work means learning to listen." I mumbled, "Yes, sir." He smiled. "You're capable on your own, but even the strongest can learn from someone beside them." I nodded and left. Outside by the lockers, Emily waited. When she saw me, she stood straight and handed me the green paperclip. "You left this." I stared at it, the one thing in the world I both wanted and feared. "Just keep it," I said. Emily blinked. "Why, I don't need it." Then I walked on my heart, heavy as stone. At the hallway's end, I glanced back. Emily stood still, staring at the clip in her hand, uncertain where to put it. I kept walking, a stubborn boy hurrying past something I should have held on to. From the day she transferred into our class, I'd practiced one thing: avoiding what I truly wanted, pretending to hate it so I wouldn't have to face how I felt. Ever since Emily sat next to me, everything in class suddenly felt different. And the only way I knew to hide it all was to pretend I did not care, even though I could never take my eyes off her. In class, whenever teachers assigned us to sit together, I always found a way to switch. The moment Mr. Coleman said, "Emily will join this group with Jack," I raised my hand. "Sir, I think I work better with Pete." The class burst out laughing. I shrugged and smirked, acting like it was no big deal, but inside every heartbeat was banging like a drum. Emily said nothing. She simply pulled her chair closer and opened her notebook. From time to time, she looked up with those bright eyes. I kept my face cold, even scowling to cover my awkwardness. Whenever Emily asked something, I gave short replies like, "I know," or "No need." And later I would regret it, hating how harsh I sounded. Out on the playground, our friends gathered to play plastic ball. I was usually pretty good, often the striker. That day, Emily stood on the sidelines cheering. My heart pounded, and suddenly my feet felt clumsy. When the ball rolled toward me, I kicked hard, but it flew too close, and Emily had to dodge. She stumbled and fell into the grass. I rushed over my hands, shaking as I reached to help her up. But in that moment, all I could say was, "Get up. You are just too clumsy." Emily blinked, then pressed her lips together and stood up, brushing off her clothes. She did not say anything, just gave a faint smile. But inside me, something felt cold and hollow. I should have said something kinder, but instead I hid everything behind a grumpy front. On the walk home, golden sunlight poured over the quiet street. Billy, my little brother, trailed behind. He looked up at me, grinning. "You like that girl, don't you?" I jumped. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Billy just kept smiling, that clear, innocent smile of his. Her face was totally red. I snapped, "Shut up," and stormed ahead. But even as I yelled, my cheeks burned hot and my heart thumped wildly. Day after day, I kept playing the same role. In class, I acted like I could not hear Emily when she asked something. During recess, if she came near, I pretended to be busy talking to someone else. When the teacher paired us up, I scowled and tapped my pen like I was annoyed. I built up this spiky outer shell to cover the simple truth. I had started liking Emily too much. But honestly, the more I pretended not to care, the more I was drawn in. Every word she said stuck in my memory longer than any lesson. Every smile she gave, I kept like a secret. And at night, lying in the dark, I would see her face so clearly that I almost wanted to reach out and touch it. Maybe that is just how childhood works. The more you like someone, the more you pretend to dislike them. The more you care, the harder you try to act like you don't. And that foolishness sometimes becomes the deepest imprint in your memories. The harder I tried to act indifferent, the more I found myself stealing glances. And then there were those moments when just a flicker of Emily's gaze swept past me, and I could not hide it anymore. One morning before class, I saw Emily sitting alone beneath the maple tree outside the library. She held a thick book in her hands, hair hanging loosely over half her face. I meant to keep walking, but instead I blurted out, "That book is probably all words. Must be boring." Emily looked up gently, tucked her hair behind her ear, and smiled. "It is mostly words, yes, but some of it is really good." "Want to hear a bit?" I shrugged. "No need." Still, when she began reading softly, clearly, I sat down on the steps nearby, pretending to tie my shoelaces. I listened to every word, and all I said at the end was, "Not bad." But the whole day, her voice and those lines she read just lingered in my head. Later during art class, the teacher let us draw whatever we wanted. I picked a bicycle just to kill time. Emily sat nearby, pencil gliding slowly but steadily. Just before the bell rang, she tore a page out and placed it on my desk. It was a sketch of a boy with a scowl and a familiar pair of eyes. It looked a lot like me. "Do you think it looks like you?" she asked. I blushed but forced myself to say, "Ugly." "Not really." Emily just smiled, folding the corner of the page slightly. "I think the eyes are spot on." I turned away, pretending not to care. But that night I pulled the drawing back out and stared at it over and over before finally hiding it under my pillow. I could say it was ugly all I wanted, but deep down I knew. She had drawn the exact eyes I always tried to hide. One late afternoon I was the last to leave because I turned in my homework late. The stone-paved path was covered in golden maple leaves, rustling in the autumn breeze. As I stepped down the stairs, Emily came out too. She hugged her notebooks to her chest and walked beside me for a while without speaking. Finally, she turned to me. "Jack, do you hate me?" I froze, mouth dry. "I do not hate anyone. I just do not like noise." Emily smiled, eyes meeting mine. "That is good." We kept walking. The wind blew her hair across her cheek. I wanted to reach out and brush it aside, but instead I kicked a dry leaf by my foot. At the intersection, Emily pulled a piece of candy from her pocket and held it out to me. "Want one? It is the last butterscotch." I quickly shook my head. I do not like sweets. But my hand still reached out, took it, and slipped it into my pocket. The whole way home, I kept touching the candy just to make sure it was still there. Words can lie, but eyes never do. Every time Emily looked at me, I knew I could not keep pretending anymore. But memories do not stop at just stolen glances. There was one rainy afternoon when we had to take shelter under the same roof. And that was when I realized just how fast my heart could race. That afternoon, the sun was still shining when dark clouds rolled in out of nowhere. The bell rang, and just as I stepped out of the school gate, the sky opened up like someone had dumped a giant bucket of water. The whole schoolyard turned white with rain. Students ran everywhere, laughing and screaming in the downpour. I hugged my backpack and dashed into the small awning of a convenience store just outside the gate. Pressed against the worn brick wall, I tried to catch my breath as my heart pounded. And then I heard quick footsteps splashing through the puddles. Emily. She ran under the awning, hair messy and soaked, uniform drenched, and her breath fogging in the cold air. She clutched a notebook to her chest, hands trembling slightly. "Mind if I stand here too?" she asked softly. Whatever I muttered, trying to sound indifferent though, inside my heart was going crazy. We stood side by side, barely an arm's length apart. The rain roared around us, bouncing off the pavement. I glanced over and saw her shoulders shivering. Inside my bag was a jacket my mom had stuffed in that morning. I wanted to offer it to her, but I was scared that if I did, it would give everything away. After a few seconds of hesitation, my mouth blurted out, "The dumbest thing, you are always so weak." Emily turned toward me. Her face was soaked, her eyes bright, but that gentle smile stayed on her lips. Not mocking, not blaming, just a small smile to ease my awkwardness. She said softly, "You are not as bad as you seem." Just one sentence, and it left me speechless. My heart felt squeezed tight. That one line peeled away the shell I had been hiding behind all along. She said it lightly, but I knew Emily had seen the real me inside. We fell silent. Emily stretched out her hand, catching a few stray raindrops and smiling faintly. "It is cold." "See," I muttered. "I told you." "Yes, but I still like it. Rain makes everything clearer." I turned away, unable to look straight at her. In truth, I wanted to ask you like it. 'Cause I am here, but all that came out was a dry week. Yeah, the rain kept falling, but under the awning, time seemed to stop. The sound of it became a steady background beat, and Emily's words kept echoing in my head. "You are not as bad as you seem." After a while, the rain slowed. Emily looked out, her voice small. "But yet, if it had not rained, you and I would never have stood still together this long." I stayed quiet. I did not dare admit that she was right, and that I wished the rain would last longer. When the rain finally stopped, we stepped out from under the awning, each going our separate ways. Emily tightened the strap of her bag, glanced back with a small smile. "See you tomorrow?" I just nodded. But deep down, I knew that rainy afternoon had carved itself deeper than any lesson in school. You are not as bad as you seem. That was the first time someone had seen through the mask I had built, and the first time I realized I could not hide anymore. I thought I would forget after that rain, but then a careless game from my friends blew everything wide open and turned into a longing I could not shake. Our school had a little back courtyard where kids often gathered during breaks. It was nothing special, just a small patch of ground with a few old wooden benches and a maple tree throwing shade. But to us it was the base for every kind of game marbles, jump rope, and all sorts of silly pranks we guarded like top secret missions. That day, summer air burned hot. We sat in a circle under the maple tree, eyes gleaming with mischief. Mike, the class instigator, clapped his hands with a loud smack. "All right, truth or dare," he shouted. Everyone cheered. A half-wet plastic bottle spun across the cement floor, and even the flick of someone's shirt tail could make it wobble. I stood with arms crossed, pretending to be bored. My heart thudded, sensing trouble. The bottle stopped, pointing at Emily. The group ooh-ed. Mike tilted his chin, grinning slyly. "Quick question, Emily. Do you like someone in class?" Emily froze. She bit her lip, her eyes darting around like looking for a way out. "Can we pick another question?" Her voice barely a whisper. "Nope." The whole group chorused. Truth or dare, I turned away, staring at dry leaves, trying to look uninvolved. But in one heartbeat, Emily glanced at me. Quick. Then she spoke, still quiet, but every word clear. "I like Jack." The moment froze. My ears rang. The buzz of cicadas, the laughter, the rolling bottle, all of it blurred into a single haze. My heart skipped a beat. My face burned red enough for everyone to see. Mike jabbed me in the back. "Well, Mr. Gentleman, what do you think?" I shot up, brushing it off. "Stupid game, kids is stuff." The group erupted in laughter, some chanting my name, some tossing maple leaves over Emily's head. She stood still, lips pressed tight, then bent to pick up her notebook. I thought that was the end of it, but the afternoon stretched strangely long. Back in class, I stared at the board while the teacher spoke and the words danced everywhere. Every time I blinked her, I like Jack echoed clear, as if whispered next to my ear. I bent over my notebook, drawing meaningless arrows around the words railroad route. Arrow after arrow tangled like a spider web, all pointing back to the one name in my mind. On the way home, sunlight poured down like honey. Mike bounced along beside me. "Come on, admit it. You got confessed to in broad daylight." confessed, it was just a dare. Yeah, just a dare. But your face was real enough. Mike laughed, then his voice softened. Hey, when you yelled like that, Emily seemed a little hurt. I never asked her to say that. Sure, but you could have said something else. I stayed silent. We reached the corner. Mike waved. See you tomorrow. I suddenly wished for more streets to walk before going home with this noise in my head. On the steps, Billy was munching an apple. He squinted at me. Did you just win a game or lose something big? Nonsense. Billy chewed slowly, then said, I heard someone likes you. He stretched the word likes like a tease. Turn it off. I waved him away and headed inside. But on the last step, I paused for half a second. If anything, it was just their game. Billy shrugged. Some games hit the truth, then he bit his apple again, leaving me standing there with his words dropping like a pebble into water. Night fell, the room swallowing sound. I opened my bag, pulled out my notebook, pretending to do homework. My pen moved across the page, but my head was back in that circle under the maple tree, the bottle spinning. Without thinking, I scribbled Jack in the corner, then scratched it out, leaving a smudge. Next to it, the sketch Emily had given me was still tucked under the cover. I slid it out and set it on the desk. The eyes in the drawing seemed to stare back at me with the same question. So what do you really feel? I imagined Emily's face when she said it, blushing but not looking away. A little shaky but not taking it back. She had said it in front of everyone, even if forced by the game. I like Jack. Those 3 words, awkward and simple, cut right through the walls I had built. I rolled over, then back again. From the living room, the radio murmured an old tune, static crackling between channels. It was like hearing someone whisper Emily's line again, in the hiss of the signal. Eyes closed, I saw her smile under the rain-soaked awning. Eyes open, the drawing sat bold on my desk. I picked it up, folded it in half, then opened it. Folded it in fourths, then opened it again. Each fold felt like one more try at touching the answer I still could not say out loud. The next morning in the hallway, I saw Emily tying her shoelace. I meant to walk straight past, but at some moment her eyes lifted and caught mine. No blame, just calm. I coughed, pretending, and blurted something random. That game yesterday was ridiculous. Yeah, Emily nodded. Ridiculous. She finished tying her shoe, stood up. But I meant it. I froze. My hand clenched the strap of my bag until my knuckles went white. No need to say things like that. All right. She smiled, small and soft. I will not. And she walked past me like a thin breeze through a wide hallway, touching nothing but a paper pinned to the bulletin board that fluttered slightly. At lunch, the group gathered again in the backyard. I sat at the edge. They switched to a new game, laughing as if yesterday never happened. But I froze. Every time someone said Jack, I flinched. Every braided hair that passed sparked my heart. I wanted to come closer, but backed off. I wanted to say something gentle, but swallowed it to stay cool. Later, our teacher assigned groups. Emily slid me a quick note. I think this curve is too sharp. Last night, I tried a better way with a little sketch. Her lines were precise and correct, but I still muttered, I can fix it myself. Emily just nodded, took her paper, left behind the soft scent of fresh paper. Some words only have to be heard once to last the whole season. The harder you deny them, the tighter they cling, like the smell of rain still on your clothes. That night I bit into the butterscotch candy I'd kept. Its slow sweetness rolled across my tongue, pulling memories the circle under the maple tree, Emily's lips in motion. I understood why that joke had become longing. It struck the thing I most feared, what I wanted to say but couldn't. From then on, each morning I walked into class hearing that line echo in my head like the bell, "I like Jack." And I realized the pretending to hate role was growing impossible to sustain. Once longing flips its switch, nobody can turn it off. Childhood is not only sweet moments. One clumsy word, one foolish tease can be enough to erase Emily's smile and leave a heavy silence. Mr. Whitman's back science room always smelled faintly of new paper and plastic. Long, dark wooden tables held plastic cups, tiny spoons, vinegar, baking soda, and food coloring. For us, 8th graders' science class was a blend of nerves and excitement. One hissing fizz could send the whole class into laughter. That day, we were to mix vinegar with baking soda. Emily and I were paired. When he called our names, my heart thudded, but I forced a scowl like I'd been given a chore. Emily held the vinegar cup, carefully steady, scooping soda spoon by spoon. Her hair fell forward, nearly touching the table. I watched, and instead of quietly doing my work, my mouth betrayed me with the usual line, "Watch it or you'll spill everything. Be careful, or your clumsiness will spill it all over." Emily froze, her hand trembling, and as if to prove me right, the spoon slipped from her fingers and plopped into the cup foam, gushing over the rim, spilling across the table with a fizz. Everyone jumped. Someone yelled, "Whoa!" And then the group burst out laughing. Emily's face turned red. She hurried to grab paper towels, but the laughter grew louder. I fumbled about to say something to fix it, but then my stupid pride blurted out another sharp line. "See, I told you. Totally clumsy." Emily went still. Her eyes lifted, no longer bright but cold. Her voice was quiet but sharp, like a thin blade. "Jack, I really hate you." The whole world seemed to stop. The laughter of our classmates faded away, leaving only that sentence echoing in my head. "I really hate you." It was not like our usual teasing, not a playful jab. This was the first time I felt a real wall rising between us. I froze my hand, squeezing the paper towel until it crumpled. I wanted to say I did not mean it, wanted to say I am sorry, wanted to say I never hated you at all. But my throat closed up. No words came out. Mr. Stanley came over frowning, slightly reminding us to stay focused. He handed Emily another cup. "Next time, go slower." Emily nodded without looking at me. For the rest of the class, I sat next to her but felt miles away. Emily was silent, focused on the experiment, not asking, not smiling. And for the first time in my life, I felt scared that if she was truly angry, I would lose the eyes and the smile I had been keeping as my secret. That was when I understood one clumsy sentence can turn the distance between two kids into a cold wall, harder to break than anything else. From that day on, a strange layer of silence settled between me and Emily. But then the school festival arrived, and seeing her laugh with someone else, my heart ached in a way I had never felt. That year's school festival transformed the sports field. Rows of game booths popped up, strings of flags stretched from bleachers to fences, and loudspeakers played cheerful music non-stop. For us 8th graders, it felt like a real carnival. I went with Mike, holding our game tickets. I chatted about can-throwing booths, but my eyes kept drifting to where Emily stood with a tall boy from another class wearing a basketball logo t-shirt. They laughed easily in a way I never could with her. My chest sank, but I stayed cool. Mike shoved 3 rubber balls into my hands. Try throwing. You win a prize if you hit. I took a breath, threw hard. All 3 missed. Mike frowned. You're usually dead on. What's going on? The balls are slippery, I muttered, but my mind was far from the game. We moved to the ring toss. I played but kept glancing at Emily. She laughed when the boys scored, eyes sparkling as they clapped together. I clenched my fists, something sharp twisting in my chest. When I won a small stuffed bear, the group shouted, "Give it to Emily." My face burned. She stood nearby, still next to him. I stiffened and shoved the bear into Mike's hands. "You keep it. I don't want it." Everyone laughed. Mike didn't just shook his head. "You're hopeless." That afternoon, the tug of war started. I pulled with all I had. But when I turned and saw Emily across the fence, smiling as she handed that boy a bottle of water, I let go of the rope early. My team stumbled. The yelling faded. All I could see was Emily's smile, not meant for me. On the way home, the sun dimmed the air, thick with cicadas. Mike walked beside me, his voice low. "Jealousy is normal, but if you keep pretending you don't care, Emily will never know what you feel." I snapped, "Who says I'm jealous?" Mike smirked. "You don't need to. Your face says it all." That night I stared at the ceiling. Festival music still echoed faintly. But all I saw was Emily smiling at someone else, over and over like a needle pressing deeper. And I realized being replaced hurts more than admitting you care. For the first time, I was truly afraid. Afraid that if I stayed silent, she would slip away, just like she had that afternoon. Turns out jealousy isn't just irritation. It's a warning: stay silent too long, and you might lose the person you want to hold on to. After the festival, my emotions were a mess. I wanted to tell her everything, but whenever I met Emily's eyes, the words stuck. Until one afternoon, they almost slipped out. It felt like something inside me had stretched to its limit. Every time I saw Emily, I felt restless. I kept pretending distant cold, but it felt like wearing a shirt too tight to breathe in. I knew what I wanted to say. But when I faced Emily, the words just got stuck. One late autumn afternoon, the air was still and golden light filled the yard. Maple leaves rustled as they fell. I was walking down the hall, heading home like always, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Jack?" I stopped, turned around. Emily was running up to me, holding a notebook to her chest. One braid had come undone, and strands of hair framed her face. Standing in front of me, she held out a ruler. "You forgot this during our group discussion. I brought it for you." I took it awkwardly. Thanks." That could have been the end of it. But Emily did not leave. She stood there, eyes locked on mine, wanting to ask something, maybe wanting to confirm something. After a moment, she spoke softly. "Yak, have you been avoiding me?" I froze. My heart pounded like it was trying to escape my chest. I quickly shook my head, trying to hide how flustered I was. "No, I've just been busy." "Busy?" Emily raised an eyebrow, her smile tinged with something sad. Too busy to even look at me when I walk over, I bit my lip. Part of me wanted to stick to the act, to respond with my usual tone. But another part, stronger, was begging, "Just say it. Say the truth." I took a deep breath, voice shaking. "Actually, I don't hate you at all. In fact, At that exact moment, Mike's voice rang out from the end of the hallway. "Hey, Jack, hurry up." Billy's waiting at the gate. I flinched, eyes shifting. Emily looked at me, still waiting. She didn't rush, didn't push, just waited. But my throat dried up and the rest of the sentence got stuck. I shook my head and mumbled, "Later." Emily blinked. She gave a small nod, a faded smile, then turned away. The wind rustled a few maple leaves between us. I stood there feeling like the secret I had carried for so long had fallen with them, unfinished, unspoken. That night I lay on my bed, the desk lamp casting light on a blank notebook page I could not write a single word on. I closed my eyes and the scene from earlier replayed like a broken tape. Emily looking at me, waiting. I had said half of it. And then, with one interruption, I chose silence. Billy knocked and peeked into my room. "What's with all the sighing?" "Nothing," I snapped, slamming the notebook shut. Billy frowned. "You're weird. If something's bothering you, just say it. Keeping it in only makes it heavier." Then he walked away, leaving me to wrestle with my own thoughts. I reached into my drawer and pulled out the drawing Emily had once given me. The eyes in the sketch stared straight ahead, unblinking, just like hers had that afternoon. I whispered to no one. If only I'd had the courage to say it. The next day in class, Emily sat by the window. As I walked past her desk, I thought about saying hi, but when her eyes met mine, I looked away, pretending to be focused on finding a seat. All class long, I felt like a coward letting fear steal my chance. During break, Mike pulled a chair next to me, his tone half joking, half serious. "So, what were you about to say to Emily yesterday before you got interrupted?" I paled. "Who told you that? Please." "Anyone could see it," Mike said, resting his chin on his hand. "If you don't say it soon, there'll come a day when you won't get the chance." I stayed quiet. I knew Mike was right, and that feeling of regret only grew every time my eyes met Emily's, only to drift away again. Some secrets, once said, halfway leave behind a memory that lasts forever. And for me, the unfinished sentence from that afternoon became a haunting reminder that I may have missed my one chance for Emily to know the truth. After that broken afternoon, something invisible settled between me and Emily. We spoke less, and the silence made every school day feel more suffocating than ever. Before, even when I pretended not to care, there were still little moments, quick glances, short replies. But now it was different. Emily sat by the window reading like the world didn't exist. When I passed by, she didn't look up. In class, when the teacher assigned groups, she still did the work, but she didn't speak to me, didn't smile. She tapped her pen on the desk, eyes fixed on her notebook like she had built a thin wall I couldn't see through. At the library, she picked a different table. We used to accidentally sit in the same corner. She once read a passage aloud to me. Now I only saw the back of her head peeking out from behind the shelves. I wanted to walk over, but my feet would not move. I walked past instead, pretending to look for an old atlas, ears straining for the sound of pages turning, but she never looked up. On the playground, she laughed with her friends. But when I got close, her smile vanished, like someone had blown out a candle. I wanted to believe I imagined it. But once then, twice, then again and again, it became clear. She wasn't angry, not openly cold. She just took one small step back, just far enough for me to feel it, just enough to leave me breathless. One day in science class, Mr. Stanley handed out tools for each group. Emily reached for a test tube at the same time I did. Our hands touched. Before, she would have flinched and smiled, awkward but warm. This time she just pulled away, quiet eyes elsewhere. My heart sank like someone had snuffed out the last flicker of hope. Mike noticed. During break, he sat beside me and said quietly, "You know, silence can be scarier than anger." Emily's not arguing with you, not teasing you anymore. That means you really hurt her. I sighed. I didn't mean to. Intentions don't change the outcome. Mike shook his head. She still hurt. At home, things weren't better. Billy stopped teasing me as much, but the look in his eyes said he knew everything. One day while slicing an apple, he said, offhandedly, "If you don't say anything, she'll forget about you." I snapped, "Just eat and quit talking nonsense." But deep down, I knew he was right. Those days, school started to feel smaller. The hallway stretched long yet. Every time I passed Emily, it felt like I was being squeezed inside a room with no door. I was trapped by silence, by words I had never spoken, by the fear that this growing distance might become permanent. Every night I took out the drawing Emily had given me and laid it on my desk. Her drawn eyes still stared at me as if asking, "How long do you plan to keep pretending I folded it and stuffed it in the drawer only to open it again?" The creaking drawer sounded like my own chest, groaning every time I remembered her distant eyes. I realized silence was not some peaceful gap. It was the thickest wall keeping two people apart. And that silence was starting to scare me more than any angry word ever could. When silence stretched long enough, I felt like I was suffocating. Too afraid to speak to her, I chose to write instead. But in the end, the letter never got sent. Day after day, the silence went on. I had never felt the schoolyard so small. Just seeing Emily walk into class made me look down, pretending to be busy with my notebook. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stayed locked in my throat. And that silence only made everything heavier. One night after dinner, I sat in my room pretending to study. Outside, the wind rustled maple leaves against the window. My math book lay open, untouched. Finally, I pulled out a blank sheet of paper and put my pen down. The words came slowly at first, then faster, like they had waited too long. "Emily, I know I have been awful lately. I say things coldly. I act like I don't care. But the truth is, I notice you more than anyone else. That day when you said you liked me, I panicked. Not because I wasn't happy, but because I was too happy. I didn't know what to do, so I pretended to push you away. But what I really wanted to say is that I like you too." I set the pen down. My heart was racing. I had never written the words I couldn't say out loud. My hands trembled as I reread the letter. The writing was shaky, but every word carried the weight of the secret I had held for so long. I folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope. All night I kept taking it out and putting it back again. Billy peeked into the room, saw me clutching the envelope, and smirked. Trying to be a novelist or something. Go to bed, I muttered, hiding the letter under a pile of books. The next day at school, the letter was in my pocket. Each step felt heavier than the last. I saw Emily at her desk, the morning light glowing in her hair. I meant to take the letter out to place it on her table. But as I passed her, I hesitated. I couldn't. I sat down, heart-pounding hand, still gripping my pocket. During recess, Emily walked out to the yard with some friends. I followed behind, meaning to call her. I opened my mouth more than once, but each time she turned her head, I closed it again. I felt pathetic. The letter burned like fire in my pocket. Mike caught me fiddling with it. He raised an eyebrow. "What's in there?" "Nothing," I muttered. Mike chuckled. "Come on, Jack. If it's what I think, then either you give it to her, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life." "Not your business," I snapped. But his words stuck with me. After school, I followed Emily toward the gate. The sidewalk was covered in golden leaves, the wind blowing hard. We walked a few steps apart. I pulled out the letter, my hand shaking. I opened my mouth, Emily, but she turned around smiling faintly at a friend who ran up to show her a test score. I stopped, tucked the envelope back into my pocket. The words died in my throat. That night I opened my drawer, placed the letter inside, and closed it. The creak of the wood sounded like a period. I lay down staring at the ceiling. Maybe Emily would never read those words. After that day, I felt it clearly. Emily was drifting away from me. Not dramatically. She didn't turn her back or say anything cruel. The distance just grew bit by bit, enough to notice, but too subtle to stop. In class, she didn't sit near me anymore. When Mr. Richards split us into groups, she chose other girls. She still focused, took neat notes, but didn't turn to ask me things like, "Do you get this part, or is your pen out of ink?" The little excuses that once brought us closer were gone. At recess, I often saw her laughing with her friends. I stayed back, catching her voice through the cicadas, never daring to approach. Once I stepped forward, but she turned to chat with a boy from another class. My feet froze. I turned away, pretending to search for a basketball. At the library, she sat deep inside near the window, sunlight lighting up her hair. I stood by the shelves, pretending to look for an atlas, sneaking glances. She flipped pages slowly, a pencil marking her spot. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I never hated you, but my legs wouldn't move. One late afternoon, I walked behind her. Leaves covered the sidewalk, golden light spilling everywhere. Emily walked with another friend, laughing. I followed a few steps behind, every laugh twisting tighter in my chest. Smiles not meant for me weighed heavier than silence. At home, Billy noticed. "What's with you? You look like you just lost the baseball finals." I snapped. "Shut up." He bit into his apple, smirking. "Keep this up and Emily really won't notice you exist." I said nothing, but his words echoed all night. I pulled out the unsent letter, read it again. The writing was shaky, the paper crumpled. Each time I read it, my chest ached. I wanted to tear it up, but couldn't. I put it back, then opened the drawer again. That creak sounded like my own sigh. Some people don't leave all at once, they fade little by little. And that bit by bit hurts the most because you see it happening and can't stop it. Then came what I feared most. One dry morning, a rumor swept through class Emily was moving. My chest tightened, like every unsaid word had become too late. Nobody knew the exact day. Some said next week, some said tomorrow. The whispers passed from hallway to library to the cafeteria. I stood in the middle of it all, ears ringing. My eyes searched and found Emily unpacking her books. Each movement slow, as if marking time. Mr. Richard entered, dropped the grade book, and cleared his throat. "Emily will transfer to a school out of state," he said simply. "We'll have a small farewell this afternoon." The words were short, but the class shifted as if someone had opened a window and let the wind in. I didn't look at the teacher or anyone, only at the soft sunlight falling on Emily's desk, where her notebook caught a faint glow. During dictation, my pen scrawled mindlessly. The teacher read, but all I heard was "Emily is leaving." Each period felt like a blow. When the bell rang, I stood too fast. My chair scraped loudly. Mike glanced over. "You okay?" I nodded, but my throat was dry like paper. By the lockers, Emily was peeling off notes from inside her door, formulas book. Lists a small photo from the festival. She paused at the photo, stared for a moment, then removed it. I stood a few steps away, unsure whether to approach or turn away. In the end, I walked up. "Are you really leaving?" I asked, though my voice didn't sound like mine. Emily nodded. Yeah. My parents got new jobs. Today's my last day. Today, yeah. I'm leaving right after school. The words leaving right after dropped like a pebble. Not heavy, but it sank straight to the bottom. I wanted to ask a million things. How far will you come back? But all I managed were broken words. Emily closed her locker and turned to me, eyes calm, not avoiding mine. I have something for you, she said, pulling a small brown notebook from her bag. The edges were slightly worn. It's for you. What am I supposed to do with this? Write down the things you can't say, Emily said with a soft smile. Like you always do. I took the notebook. It felt both heavy and light at once. Heavy because my hand was trembling. Light because it was still empty. I flipped it open. On the very first page, centered neatly, was a single sentence in small handwriting. You don't have to pretend anymore. No name, no date. But the words made the page glow like someone had turned on a light inside it. I looked up. I'm sorry, I blurted out as if afraid the train would leave without me. For making you sad. For that day in science class. For everything. Emily shook her head. I'm not taking those things with me. Then what are you taking? The good parts? And she paused. A few things you never managed to say. That afternoon, the class set up a small table by the window. A few girls folded paper cranes. Some wrote, "Good luck" in bright markers. Mike shoved a pen into my hand. Write something. I stood there unsure. Take care, see you again. Nothing sounded right. In the end, I wrote just 4 crooked words. I'll miss you, okay? When I finished, my face burned like I'd shouted it across the schoolyard. Mike glanced at it and nodded. First time you're not pretending. When it was Emily's turn to say goodbye, she stood near the teacher's desk, gripping her uniform. Thanks, everyone, she said, her voice steadier than I expected. I'm not good with words, but I'm really glad I met you all. Her eyes moved row by row. When they landed on me, they paused just a moment longer. I sat, frozen, clutching my notebook between my knees, afraid that if I let go, it would crash to the floor. At the end of the day, Mr. Richard dismissed us 5 minutes early. The hallway buzzed, with noise lockers slamming open and shut. I walked a few steps behind Emily, watching her hug friends and shake hands. Everything felt sharp and clear, like a soap bubble, real but untouchable. We reached the school gate. The sky had turned grayer, a cold wind curling beneath the fence. At the loading area, her parents were packing the car. Her dad wore a beanie jingling keys. Her mom smiled gently, but her eyes were red. I stood off to the side, gripping my backpack straps so tightly my knuckles turned pale. Emily turned back toward the class, waving goodbye to everyone. I felt Mike nudge me from behind. Go. What do I even say? Say what you have to. You think I can? I don't know. Mike shrugged. But if you don't, I'll hate you on her behalf. I stepped forward. Each step felt like I was walking on all the words I never said. Emily saw me and her smile appeared. Not too big, not too small. Just right. Jack, she said. Just my name. Nothing more. Like she was leaving the rest for me to fill in. I held up the notebook awkwardly. Thanks. Don't throw it away, she teased. I won't. I swallowed. I'm sorry. And my voice broke at the last word. Not because someone called me, just because there was a lump in my throat, right where all the things I'd ever swallowed down had piled up. I took a deep breath. Tried again. Emily tilted her head slightly. Her eyes soft. I know. But I haven't said anything yet. It's okay, she smiled. Some things you don't have to say out loud. Her mom called Emily time to go. She nodded, turned to me one last time. Take care, okay? Yeah. You too, I heard myself say, the most generic goodbye people say, when they can't think of anything better. Take care. Right after saying it, I wanted to bite my tongue. Why that line now? Emily didn't tease. She nodded, stepped onto the car. On the second step, she turned around and raised her hand like she wanted to touch the air between us. Jack, she said softly, don't pretend anymore. The car door closed. The engine hummed. The car pulled away. I stood still watching through the small window. Emily sat by the glass, her forehead leaning against it, arms hugging her bag. As the car passed by me, she waved. It was a wave everyone would understand as goodbye. But to me, it felt like a beautifully written period at the end of an unfinished sentence. I ran after the car for a few steps, not really knowing why. Just to make sure I'd walked every bit of the road I could. The car turned the corner and vanished behind the red brick wall of the buildings. The cold wind crept under my collar. I stood there for a bit longer, rubbing the notebook cover. Beneath that brown cardboard was the sentence still resting warm like a tiny ember. You don't have to pretend anymore. Some goodbyes don't come with loud tears or dramatic scenes. Just one short sentence so short you can remember it forever. Don't pretend anymore. That sentence peeled off every mask I'd worn all year, leaving me exposed to the truth I'd liked her. And I was too late. That afternoon I walked home alone. The street felt longer. Every place Emily had walked by seemed more vivid than ever. The school bench where she tied her shoelaces, the edge of the field where she read books, the shop awning where we once stood under the rain. I got home, went to my room, opened the drawer, and placed the notebook inside carefully. I opened the first page again, read that line one more time then. With a trembling pencil, I wrote underneath it, I'll try. That night I cracked my window open just a little. The cold air slipped in, carrying the dry scent of fallen leaves. I placed the notebook at the edge of my desk, brushing my hand against its cover from time to time, as if afraid it might disappear. I thought about all the moments I could have spoken under the maple tree, near the library during art class, when she gave me the portrait beneath the store awning on that rainy day. When she said, "You're not as bad as you pretend to be." And at the bus stop when all I managed to say was, "Take care." All those moments lined up like a string of half sentences, of missed chances. But threading through that chain of almosts was one slender string that held the notebook. Something that stayed, something that gave me no more excuses to hide. I turned off the lights and the room fell into darkness. Outside, a car passed by, its headlights sweeping a yellow arc across my wall before vanishing. I closed my eyes and saw Emily's hand waving behind the glass again. Her words, "Don't pretend anymore," glowing like white letters in the night. I didn't know how tomorrow would be different. I only knew that from that moment on, every time I tried to cover things up with a sharp word or cold shrug, another voice inside me would whisper back, "Don't pretend anymore." Tomorrow, our class would be one person short. The seat by the window would be empty. Emily's locker would no longer hold her sticky notes. But in my bag, I carried a notebook and its first page already had something written. I closed my eyes and pulled the blanket tighter. Maybe someday I would be able to write down the things I never had the courage to say. Not to send, but to remember that once someone had seen right through my shell and told me, "Don't pretend anymore." Emily left, and in doing so, left. behind an emptiness that wasn't easily filled. In the days that followed, I still went to school, still did my homework, still laughed with friends, but everything felt like it was missing a piece. Every time I passed the seat by the window, I instinctively looked over expecting a smile, a glance, then remembered she wasn't there anymore. Time passed, and those 13-year-old days drifted far behind me, but the memories stayed sharp. Sometimes on a rainy afternoon, I'd think of the store awning near the school gate where she once said, "You're not as bad as you pretend to be," or when flipping through old notebooks, I'd spot my scribbles next to her familiar handwriting. I meant it. The letter I never sent still sits quietly in my drawer, and the notebook she gave me still has those words on the first page. You don't have to pretend anymore. I used to fear it, used to hide it carefully. But the older I get, the more I realize it was the most precious gift of my childhood. A reminder that there are some feelings we can't run from forever. Now at 68, sitting in a small room with a warm cup of coffee, I tell this story like flipping through the pages of my life. Maybe we parted ways long ago, each of us following a different path. But in my heart, Emily is still that same girl, with braided hair, a shy smile, and the gentle eyes that once saw through the foolish boy who pretended to hate her just to hide how much he cared. Maybe we all have our own Emily, someone who left us so flustered we had to pretend we didn't care, but who stayed in our memory deeper than anyone else. And sometimes it's the innocent, unspoken feelings that linger the longest. If you've ever had a half-kept secret like mine, feel free to share it in the comments below. Who knows, maybe there's a memory in your story that has been asleep for years, but all it takes is a mention to bring it back to life. And don't forget to follow the channel so we can keep turning through the chapters of forgotten moments together, me, Jack Wilson, and you.